I'm working remotely there, so I started in December. Then I worked part-time here this past semester. So I enjoyed my time here at NU and good experiences, and I appreciate all the opportunities and so forth. But I'm looking forward to going back home where I'm from. So, okay, so I teach first year writing courses and communication courses at Trine, and one of them is a humanities course um, called The Science of Storytelling. So this course, it's not a creative writing course. It's a course that focuses on narrative writing, and all students are required to take this course in their first year program. So one of the assignments is called a self story. So students are supposed to write 750 to 1,000 words, their personal narrative where they talk about an experience. And then in the class, we teach narrative arc theory concepts, principles from narrative arc theory. So they're required to apply some of those concepts to their personal essay to add structure to it. So the purpose today is twofold. So first, I want to look at analyze how the students constructed their COVID-19 experience, because I started in 2022. So I adjunct for Trine for about a year and a half. So a lot of students were writing about their COVID-19 experience for their self-story. So I'm going to analyze how they constructed their experience, but also I want to demonstrate um, how the narrative arc feature on this computer automated program called Loop 22. I just want to demonstrate how I'm using it in class. I've been tinkering with it for about a year, and I really, really like this program. It costs $26 per year, so it's affordable. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about that, then how you can use Loop 22 to teach EAP as well as first year writing courses. Okay, so here are the features. So first, the main feature is called the Luke Workbench. I don't really use this a lot, but what this is a group of psychologists got together. There's a dictionary of over 30,000 words. They took all the words, they put them in categories according to psychological categories, psychological states, like positive emotion, negative emotion, cognitive types of words. So I don't really find this useful except for a technical communication course. Students, and there's a business writing section where they have to write like a complaint note or report, emails to an angry customer. So they're required to learn how to write with a positive tone. So I use that to analyze their writing, but also to build to create content. Next is the contextualizer. So this is like a concordance. If you use like Lancebox or Anconc, a corpus tool, except it's a little bit different. So it has a feature on it where you can it's connected to the Luke Workbench. So if you want to find all the words and whatever text you're looking at, if you want to find positive words, negative words, words that talk about anxiety, anger, happiness, whatever. There's about 189 of these psychological categories. You click on that, and then it'll show all the words in your text or your corpus, whatever you're looking at. It'll bring that up for you, and then it puts it in just like a concordance, so you can see the context. You can create as much context as you want to view the word. Okay, the next feature, meaning extraction. I've never used this, but this basically just looks at themes in a text or a corpus. I've never used it yet. Then there's word frequency and compare word frequency. This is really useful for any kind of writing class. So what you can do is you can compare texts, and then it will tell you what words are frequent in one text compared to the other. So it's great especially for curriculum development, actually. The next one, the language style matching. I've never used this either, but it just compares. You can compare text, look at styles of writing. Then there's narrative arc. So that's what I want to talk about today. I've been using that in my storytelling class. I find it very useful and a lot of fun. And then the case studies. So what that is you can there's a case study feature where you copy and paste a text, and then all of these other features are there, so you can analyze it however you want. So it's great for if you want to give feedback to student writing, you just plug in that or upload that student's paper, and then you can analyze it using all these different tools. So I find that very useful as well. Okay, so narrative arc. So what does it mean? What can we infer from it? It's the underlying structure behind a story. And then it indicates that if you write a story and there's an arc to your story, it just means that that you understand the meaning of the story. That's the kind of the theory behind it. So something that's been interesting that I've been into probably the past couple months is I've been slowly working through this book, Trauma in Literature. So an interesting area of research is the connection between trauma and storytelling. So they found that they take people that have a serious traumatic experience in life, like military veterans who struggle with PTSD. And then what they'll do is when they help them write out their experience, the traumatic experience in the form of a story, and by doing that, it helps them understand their experience better. They find meaning in the trauma, and I'm not a psychologist, but somehow that actually helps them heal from it. So very interesting area of research. Okay, so the narrative arc feature in Luke 22 came out in 2020, so it hasn't been around for a long time. But there are a few studies. One interesting study is Guzzardi et al. 2023. So these authors looked at abstracts of scientific peer-reviewed academic scientific articles, and they compared systematic reviews with primary studies. And they found differences between the two. The systematic reviews, I believe, were closer to the normative arc than the primary studies. Another interesting study, and this is what I'm kind of following, is Nicole's 2024 teaches, this author teaches creative writing class. And so this teacher likes to compare different assignments in class and see which ones are closer to the normative arc. Found that scientific fiction is closer to the normative arc than creative nonfiction. This is interesting finding in that study. The last one is music lyrics. So these authors looked at pop, rap, and country lyrics and found that actually, interestingly enough, they all follow the narrative arc. Interestingly, country was the highest in the staging part of narrative, and pop had, we'll talk about this later, but pop had better plot progression and cognitive tension. Rap was nothing really with rap, I guess. Okay, so how does the narrative arc feature in Luke 22 work? It's based off of a the kind of a traditional 5-stage process of narrative arc. And so here are the 5 stages. First, you have an introduction. So this is where characters, places, and things are introduced to the story. And then you have, the current state of affairs is established. Then you have a disruption. So a conflict is introduced, could be a new character enters the scene, or some kind of event or action. Then the conflict intensifies until it reaches a climax. Then the characters have to figure out, well, how do you resolve the conflict? So there's more cognitive tension going on because they're trying to come up with a strategy to resolve the conflict. Then once they resolve the conflict, then you have a falling action, and then it leads to the end of the story. That's the resolution. So Luke 22 is based off of this theory, and what they did is a group of psychologists got together in 2020, conducted a study, and they broke down those 5 stages into 3 dimensions. So they looked at over 40,000 texts, included novels, short stories, movie scripts, and these things called TATs. I don't know fully what TAT is, but how they're used is they're used in psychology where a patient will be given a picture, then the person has to write a story about the picture. And then from that, the psychologist can determine what kind of psychological states they're in from that. So, and what's interesting is that the TATs are written by, normal people, so to speak, whereas novels, short stories, these are kind of professional writers. So it's interesting that there's a pattern in both. So these three dimensions, the first one on the left is this is the staging dimension. So what they theorized was that in the staging part of the story, you're going to have more articles, nouns, and prepositions because you're introducing characters, introducing places, and then and prepositions showing the relationship between places and people and so forth. And interestingly enough, it seems like it makes sense. You have a higher frequency in the beginning of the story, but then over time, those groups of words, there's a lower frequency as the story develops. Next is the plot progression. So after the staging area, now you have the conflict, and so now you have your plot developed. You have more verbs, more conjunctions, because you're showing a relationship between actions and events. You have a higher frequency of pronouns because now you're referring back to names of people and places in the staging area, and also more negatives. And so with those, so they looked at the frequency of these groups of words, and you could see kind of an arc here. In the beginning, in the staging area, you have fewer, lower frequency of these types of words, but as a plot develops, then you have more. Then it kind of peaks out near the end. So, and notice how all of them seem to follow that same shape. There is some variation between the different types, but they still seem to follow that shape. Then the last one is cognitive tension. So what they did is that is linked to that dictionary. So they took all the words that are relate to cognition, and they calculated the frequency of those words. And the theory was that there should be fewer in the beginning, but then as the plot progresses, you can have more. And so you can see how there's a higher frequency, it reaches a climax, and then it kind of dips down at the end at the end of the story. So Luke 22 is based off of this study, and what it does is that they took the average of all these frequencies, and that became the normative arc. Okay, so then in Luke 22, if you upload a corpus or a individual paper, then it will compare the frequencies, and how it compares it is that there's a range of scores from negative 100 to 100. So if a story is at negative 100, that means it's the inverse of the normative arc. If it's 100, it's the exact same as a normative arc. So a bad score actually is a 0. If there's a 0, that means there's no arc. It means it's not a good story. You probably don't know, it means that they're not quite sure what the story means. Okay, so here's an example. So this was a group of 5 stories, self-stories, and they were all about a game that the student played. So Northern Indiana, they play baseball, basketball, football. So the total score at the top is at 18. That's the combined score. Okay, not that great. Staging, they have a score of 38. You can kind of see an arc there. And by the way, in Luke 22, we'll just spit out this graph for you for all dimensions. So it's really helpful. So it's not too bad, but look at plot progression, not much of an arc, and it's relatively low score. And then cognitive tension is almost 0. You can see that there is no arc to it at all. So the reason for this, as I read these stories, is that what the students will do is they'll just talk about what happened in a game. There's no theme to it. There's no structure to it. They'll just say, okay, first quarter we were losing, then we caught up, and then they took the lead, so on and so forth, and then we lost the game or won the game. So there's no real story to it. Okay, so I taught this course for about 7 times now, so I have about around 211 stories. I've grouped them by name or type, and then what I do is I put them through Luke 22. I get the mean, and then I run the means through SPSS, and I compare the means. Jonathan Dahlman, he teaches math here at CPS, so he's helped me with the statistics part, helped me with which statistical test to use. So I want to give thanks to him, and then I have IRB approval from Trine May 15th. Okay, so here's the breakdown of the corpus. So COVID stories are on the top, so I have 9 of them. Kind of a limitation. I would like to have more. The word count average is on the far right. So in order for it to work, you need at least 250 words. Otherwise, you're not going to get an outcome that's meaningful. So next type is personal challenge. So in these types of stories, students talk about a personal challenge they have, for example, a bully at school, sports, trying to make the team or become a starter, lots of relationship challenges. And I also have older students who talk about a complication during pregnancy as well. There's a lot of those. Okay, so the next one is new experience. So these are stories about first job, learning how to drive. So most of these students are younger, so they just started driving not too long ago, starting college, learning a new instrument or new sport. Then we have death. So lots of stories about death, family member, friend, accident, lots of car accidents, also accidents at workplace where there was an injury. Then fear, childhood fear. A lot of students are afraid of spiders. It's kind of interesting. Animals, getting lost is a common one as well. And has anyone gotten lost in a cornfield, by the way? Oh, really? Okay. I have several of those. That's a very scary experience. It's worse than getting lost in the woods because everything is the same. So it's hard to find your way out of a cornfield. And then some natural disasters as well. Okay, so here are the results. Oh, no, so my questions. So first I want to compare COVID-19 stories with other stories in the group. Second is I want to compare the different types with each other. And then my guess was that COVID-19 stories would be different than the rest because they would probably follow the normative arc. I thought they would be great stories, easy to write about because there was a clear disruption. It's challenging, and so I thought that they would tend to follow the normative arc. I do want to point out there's been a slight change. I'm just going to look at the quantitative aspect of this because of time. So, okay. So in the results, so first at the overall narrative score. So you can see, so 0 again is in the middle. COVID stories, you see the black line, that's at 50%. COVID stories are almost relatively the same as the entire corpus. That trine means that the entire corpus of stories of the class. Then we have the different types after that. So COVID, interestingly enough, isn't really that different. A personal challenge is the most different. That was an interesting finding there. So here's the statistics, break it down. So COVID with personal challenge, I put an arrow there, not technically significant, but you can see that it looks like there's a trend. Probably if you added more, build up your sample, then it would eventually be significant. But also look at COVID and death. Those are, they're very similar. Okay. And then the only statistically different types were new experience and personal challenge. So personal challenge is different than these other types. Okay, so staging. So with staging, notice how all of them at least hit that 50 mark. So actually the students do well with staging, and this feature shows that. It's easy to see. They're all relatively high. There's no difference between them of any of the types. So as a whole, students do well with staging. But then notice how with plot progression, it dips down. So they struggle with plot progression. And I haven't quite figured out what the problem is, if it's a language problem or they just struggle with finding a theme in the story, but it dips down. In especially COVID is kind of bunched up near 0, so they have a low score for plot progression. But new experience and personal challenge, again, that's the only significant difference. Personal challenge is closer to the narrative arc than new experience. Then the third is cognitive tension. So it's even worse with COVID. They're even bunched up even more. There is no arc at all with cognitive tension with COVID stories. Then there's a few outliers. Those circles are outliers. But there were some differences. Death and accident were very different. Death, there wasn't much of an arc at all. Accident, there was. Not quite significant with fear and personal challenge, but almost. And then fear and accident were different, but for different reasons. So I have some graphs here. So with accident, you can see that there is the arc, kind of follows the normative arc. In fear, it's the inverse. So that's why they're very different. But an inverse arc is actually still a good thing. It's still an arc. And it makes sense with fear because the reason why it starts kind of high with cognitive tension is that the story will start with the student will talk about, like, let's say it's fear of spiders. They'll talk about when they were 3 years old, they were afraid of spiders, they had nightmares and so forth. And then they would then they start talking about the story, and then they would talk about later on in life, this is how they overcame that fear. So that's kind of why it dips like that. But there's still an arc, and um, it's still a good story. Okay, then COVID and death, there is no arc at all. And I find this very interesting. Um, so this could indicate that they struggle with finding meaning out of their experience with these. Okay, so the structure of COVID stories are close to new experience and death narratives, not very close to normative arc. That was a surprise. And so that means that they may tend to struggle with making sense of their COVID-19 experience. And then interestingly enough, it was the personal challenge stories were tend to score very high, and they seem to be different than the rest of the stories in the group. So that was an interesting finding. Okay, implications for teaching. So what this program did for me personally, so far, I mean, I'm still working on this ongoing project. I would like to have more stories, but it shows very clearly where problems are in writing. So for this assignment, there's definitely a problem with the plot progression. So I need to figure that out. There's definitely differences in story types. So this is good, especially if you have a weaker writer. Um, I'll be talking about this in class more, which story types tend to be harder to write narrative than others. For EAP, I think it's great for assessing narrative writing. Even if it's not, if the genre is not narrative, you can still analyze abstracts and introductions. So anything that has even embedded narrative is still, you could still use this to assess that. Graphs, charts, and stats. This program just a click of a button, you got some nice graphs and statistics. Trine University is mainly STEM. We have an English bachelor's degree, but even that degree, half of the courses are communication. So it's not really even a full humanities degree program. It's mainly STEM. And students who come to Trine, their whole purpose for being there is to get a job. So so a lot of my engineering students, computer science students, they love if you give them a graph or a chart and you give feedback about their writing and you say your writing you need to improve here because look, it's different than the rest of the group, they will really, that appeals to them more than just giving them a written feedback. So this is very helpful for that. That I think is good for curriculum development is I'm already going to be looking at some of these differences and want to add that to my to the content of the course. I don't teach, my next class is October, I think I'm scheduled, so I have plenty of time to make those changes. Okay, so looking ahead, I'm actually after doing this study, I'm actually interested in crisis narratives. I've already started with 9/11 stories, and also I have about 50 stories of people talking about where they were when JFK was assassinated, and they're very similar. with cognitive tension with COVID. So I find that interesting. It'd be nice to talk about that in class. Also, we have a lot of students. So we have a sister school in Malaysia and in China. So we have a lot of Chinese students, a lot of Malaysian students, and some students from India. So I would like to also see the differences, compare differences with students from different countries and see if there are any differences there. So some recommended resources. So this is a book I just recently got. The author is, he got his medical degree from Harvard, and he is published a lot in peer-reviewed academic journals. But he also teaches, he offers a lot of writing workshops for scientists for, to help them get published. And he uses, he took a creative, in his grad work, he took a creative writing course, and that helped him. He studied narrative arc theory, and that helped him develop as a writer for academic writing. So that's an excellent, I think, resource. 150 pages, pretty simple read. Then also this website here, Arc of Narrative. This is free, so this is good for students. And what you can do is you actually, the guy who created this was one of the authors for Luke 22. And so you can copy and paste your paper, put it in, it'll give you the graphs, the statistics. Then also they have stories that you can compare to kind of see how your art compares to other different types of stories. So it's a nice tool to have in class. That's it. Thank you.